They have stripes, he goes, yeah, it certainly did.
There it is.
I could probably count easy 10 different animals I've seen out there.
We have over 4,000 sightings of thylacines on the mainland since 1936.
Many of those sightings are detailed, they are done by professional people.
They were standing there, we're going to prove what is out there. That's our mission.
And he saw the striped fox jumped up from behind a heap of logs.
Oh, yeah, I've just seen the thylacine.
Definitely had dark lines like stripes.
I slammed on the brake, my chest hit the steering wheel, and I said, what the flip was that?
Follow a party of footprints I've sent you.
Yep.
There's obvious heel prints, so you know the rounded ball heel at the back?
Yeah, on the hock.
Yeah, with the hop, the with toes, foot, the whole lot, the tracks of it. We've got skid marks where they've come running in and done a sliding halt and then taken off the other way. Looks like they've been playing. There's different sized feet.
You've got a den site under a big pile of logs, yeah?
Yeah, we're going to try and get him to come down and camp a night on the weekend at the back with infrared cameras.
We've collected well over 7,000 sightings between the mainland and Tasmania, 5,000 of those on the mainland. When you start looking at the clustering of those sightings, it starts to become pretty evident that there's definitely something out there. Not all of those people can be wrong. You know, there has to be something in this.
Well, congratulations.
That's away when you see the photos I've sent you.
Yeah, I will, I know. It sounds like you have found the find of the century.
So a thylacine is a really peculiar evolution of Mother Nature. It looks like a dog, it behaves like a cat, and it runs like a horse. It's a marsupial, it's got a backward-facing pouch, it's got 4 teats, so it can have up to 4 young, but most of the time they're observed with 2 or 3 young. In regards to Tasmania, it was pretty obvious that the bounty on thylacines is what wiped them out. I think a lot of people in Australia feel guilty to a certain degree on a national conscience kind of scale, because it was something that we screwed up with, essentially. As a nation, we handled that animal really poorly and we treated it badly, and it slipped away from us because of that. I don't think it fully slipped away from us. I think it got very close to being extinct, but I think the animals definitely persisted in Tasmania, because I've seen too. And with the amount of information that's come through on the mainland, I think it's definitely on the mainland as well. The people of Australia, I think, would feel fantastic and be given a huge amount of psychological boost if we could prove the thylacine wasn't extinct. It represents a whole lot of hope for a whole lot of people, and it's a chance to redeem ourselves as a nation and not have this scar on our psyche because of how poorly we treated the animal. We've got evidence to suggest that thylacines were definitely on the mainland when Europeans first arrived in Australia. It's in written history. We've got a newspaper article referring to a date in 1836 when a fellow was camping at Glenelg on the Adelaide Plains, and he actually shot at one that was trying to catch some rats. Yeah, that's the earliest reference to European settlement and thylacines that I've found on the mainland in 1836. There's also lots of sightings of thylacines going back to even Joseph Banks' diaries, I believe, mentioned thylacines on a beach. Now, you know, they were the first Europeans here, allegedly, with the Endeavour's journey, and there was something sighted on the beaches in Queensland that fits the description of thylacine at the time. So to say they were extinct on the mainland at the time of white settlement is a little bit naive. We have Dr. Litchfield's report where he did a speech to the Mechanics Institute in Adelaide in 1839, and he clearly stated that thylacines were part of the fauna of South Australia at the time. Again, it's just more written evidence to suggest they were around. Dr. Bob Paddle has quoted that they were listed as part of the fauna of Victoria when whites first settled there. So they were there.
I have no problems in saying the animal was still on the mainland in the 1840s. The very first listing of mammals in South Australia also lists the Tasmanian tiger as a South Australian species. And there are records from Aboriginal communities in South Australia that the thylacine was certainly around until the 1920s. And if it was there in the 1840s, in terms of Aboriginal records, at least in the 1920s, there may still be pockets of mainland thylacines surviving to this day.
There is the Mundravilla specimen, which was found in the mid-60s, and that was dated at somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years, I believe, from the carbon dating test. But that is one hell of a well-preserved specimen for something that's meant to be 3,000 years old.
There is a demand that science keep an open mind.
I was filming the sunrise just as we are now on time lapse, and then I saw something out of the corner of my eye come across. I thought, fox, dog, doesn't matter, I want to capture this thing and run across in front of the sun. So I stopped the time lapse, switched it over to normal filming, zoomed it in a bit and kept filming.
With Paul Day's video, you know, he filmed what he filmed, running through a paddock. Now that's come back as, from one of the scientists at Adelaide Uni, has confirmed that it's definitely not a fox. And I think that's largely based on the physical dimensions of the animal. So he's done a bit of biomechanics on that and discovered, lo and behold, it's not a fox. Paul Day's video brought a lot of sightings data out of the woodwork. I got a sighting from 1944 from between Baskerville and Moonta. So, you know, that's a really old sighting for the same rough area as where Paul saw his. All up, we ended up with about 8 sightings from that one video. So you can say what you want about ambiguous videos, but they do pull a lot of sightings data out. Some of these people might be seeing foxes, whippets, dogs, who knows. But there is some stuff there that is very consistent, and these people don't even know about each other's sightings, but they describe the same sorts of things. So what they're seeing is definitely an unusual animal, and a lot of people are describing they're seeing stripes. A lot of people that see them don't even know what the animal is. They've never seen one before. They've never got any preconceived notions of looking and finding a thylacine, looking for and finding a thylacine. So it's just a random thing that happens, and when it happens, it's profound, and it sticks in people's minds because of the uniqueness of this animal. I'm getting a couple of sightings a month at the moment, sometimes 2 or 3 in a week. It just depends on the month, really. But yeah, there's certainly a lot more information coming in than there was.
Amongst the romanticism, it's highly likely there's some very factual things which tell us something that hasn't been picked up on, but we haven't got the hard proof to get it to the science level. A lot of people that are trained, they specialise in a particular thing, and they get to know it very well. But the big picture, you need all these specialised bits to key together
the whole story,
to understand what's going on.
We've never really gone looking for them on the mainland. You know, this has only just started to happen in Queensland with the James Cook University up in Cairns. So, you know, it's a long leap of faith to catch up with this whole sightings phenomenon, and for science to get on board and actually investigate it, because people do see things, and some sightings are very solid. I think one of the sightings that they're investigating up there came from park rangers. Now, if park rangers don't know what a thylacine looks like, then God forbid, scientists must be the only ones on the planet who can say what a thylacine looks like based on a sighting. But science isn't based on sightings, we get that, but sightings lead to evidence. One of the best things about our effort towards trying to prove this has been the way we've supported witnesses and, you know, defended them basically, and not ridiculed them, and given them an opportunity to talk about their experience without the fear of ridicule, and that's made a huge difference in the amount of data that we've been receiving.
And then back from here, when our animals die out, it's just like a human being. We don't say their name no more. But with the Mudokuli, we still speak his name.
Well, I was approached by Regina via Facebook and the group Thylacine Awareness Group of Australia. Her family's been in the Flinders Ranges for 40,000 plus years. They have a lot of history with the animal through their culture, through their storytelling and through their cultural practices as well. They actually have some very recent sightings as well, and it's not just Regina, it's her daughter, her granddaughter. Only 2 weeks ago there was a sighting. They've had some really interesting sightings where there was 3 or 4 of them at the same place at the same time, and they all saw the same thing.
My first sighting was when I was 5 in Murrukuli. Like, we've seen them off and on in between, but the one that was really, really clear, and I knew what it was back down on the Urrumbula Range. And myself, my daughter and my mother went out and we saw 2 Murrukulis. And they weren't far from us. They would have been about 10, 20 metres. And that was during the daytime, 1:30 in the afternoon. Took my mother out, because my mother was in her 90s, so I took her out. I had to take her out for like a little picnic. We set up the table, and then I said, I'm going to go up to the rocks and take some photos of the rock. And my daughter had the camera, and as we was walking up, we heard sounds. The sound that we all know and connect to a Murrukuli. And my daughter actually got scared because there are stories about Murrukulis taking children, as the stories tells. And she started getting scared. She said, Mum, that's a Murrukuli. I was like, yeah, just go for a walk. And then all of a sudden up on the rock, there was a Murrukuli. It was standing there, it was clear as day. The second one jumped up next to it, on the rock next to it. But when it jumped from one rock to the next, stand next to its mate, it hopped. Yep, it leaned back on its back foot and its tail, and it launched itself, like hopped. And it was only when the other one yawned, and my daughter saw the nice big choppers that it had. She ran. She panicked and ran with the camera. Yeah. And like by the time I got back down to the car, her and Mum already packed up the table and the picnic, and they had it in the car. And my mum, being my mum, she goes, "You're not taking my granddaughter back up there where the Murrukulis are." The geese were going crazy, and so were the dogs. And I was like, oh no. I thought there was another dog harassing the geese. We've actually lost 2 geese. I went outside and opened the door and went out, and all of a sudden a Murrukuli was standing there, but there's like, as you can see into the grass that I showed you. Yep. When it froze, if I didn't know that it was there and I came out and it froze before I came out, I would have never saw it. Yep. But I saw it when it was moving. Yep. And so, but when it stopped, it blended into the grass. It was very easy. They're good hiders. What it
means, he's trotting along, he's running and the song's running, and he's happy as he goes along. He's happy to be in the land, and he's running and he's happy. These things still must exist there. In places, they're very quick, they're very sharp.
He doesn't like me saying it, but I think my big brother's a legend. I'm very proud of him. The songs and stuff that Ken sings, the songs that my father sung to us, has been handed down. What I'm really proud of is that my daughter, she's got the songs as well. She passes it down to her children as well.
They've had a living culture with Australian wildlife for, like I said, 40,000 plus years, and they have got an intricate knowledge of the different wildlife in the area, both past and present, and their knowledge and their understanding of the way thylacines work through the country and the different routes that they take on their migration is priceless.
And me and my dad used to come up and walk up here with us. And he used to tell us the stories about the land in the hills in the country. My father was what you call a Wullurum, and he was a Arjawiri. He was a big man in the culture here. But they'd dance around in this area. There's dance grounds back up in this area as well. Okay. Where they used to do the dance for the Murrukulis. But the Murrukulis, wasn't just here in this area. It moved up through, like all storylines, everything is sacred, but there's always that storyline for the children. Because our culture is about education. We had to educate our children in the stories, and they'd go through and they'd learn all the different stories when they were little, and then as you get older you learn the different types of stories. It's the same story but more in depth. Yep. And the story that I'm talking about is this child's story. When they lived in this area, that was when there was no inland sea. It was all tropical country, like rainforest. This is how the story is. It was when everything was a rainforest. The black mudderkudly, which is the largest of all the mudderkudlies. See, in our culture, we knew that there was 6 subspecies of thylacines. Yep. There's a really big one, and there's the one that we all know of today, which everybody knows as the Tassie tiger. Yep. He was the middle one. When they talk about it, the mudderkudly in this story is, they represent, you know where you find the ochre? That represents their blood. And if you go further up to Para, which is Vukutu, that's the blood of the black mudderkudly. She was the largest of the mudderkudlies. The old man was down there with his son, and he wanted to go hunting with kangaroo, and he told his son not to go to the water hole, and he said because of the mudderkudlies. And son stayed in camp for a while, but he disobeyed his father. When his father went out looking for kangaroo, it got hot, and he thought he wouldn't know if I went to the spring, so he went up into the spring, and what happened, he swam around, and then as he got out and he sunned himself, that's when the black mudderkudly grabbed him and, you know, killed him. And the old father came back, and he actually found the son, and he was crying, and when he was crying, he heard a voice behind him say, "Nanga, how are you? Hello. What are you crying for?" And he turned around and he seen a lizard, a blue lizard that we know as the Idni Radapa. And this lizard had an air belt. And in his air belt he had all the boomerangs. He told the Idni Radapa, "Oh, he's my only son." Idni Radapa thought, he felt so sorry for this old man. He said, "I'll go and kill the mudderkudlies, and I'll bring the little boy's spirit back." So that's when he started on his quest to come up this way, and found the first lot of mudderkudlies here, killed them, and he went down and he waited for the black one. But his brother, the Cadney, and that's the bearded dragon, he came to visit his little brother. He came here and he seen the mudderkudlies dead, and he's like, "Why?" He's seen his brother's track, and he followed him back down to Para. When he followed him to Para, he found him, and he goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Shh, I'm waiting for the black mudderkudly, I'm waiting for the black mudderkudly." And he goes, "But you can't kill the black mudderkudly. If you kill her, the sun will go out." And he was so intent on waiting for his black mudderkudly, he didn't hear what his brother said. When the black mudderkudly put her head out, he dropped her with the boomerangs. As soon as her head and blood hit the ground, the sun went out. His brother gave him the boomerangs, and he gets the boomerangs, and he throws it north, he throws it west, and he throws it south, and then he throws it east. When he threw it east, a tiny bit of sun come up. And he continued doing this pattern for a very long time, and he got really tired, and then he started losing boomerangs as well. And he got down to the last boomerang, and he's thinking, you know, I've got to get the sun up. And he thought, I want to throw it east to come up a little bit. So he threw it northeast. When he done that, that's when the sun come up. He said to his brother, "Look, that little boy, he was wrong, not the mudderkudlies. He shouldn't have disobeyed his father. He would never have been eaten if he listened to his father."
Gary and Liz Doyle were on their honeymoon travelling around Australia, and they happened to venture into the Flinders Ranges in South Australia, and they were going to stay at the Rupunapone campground. And it started to rain, and they were excited on holiday, and they had one of those 8mm movie cameras. And as they were driving in, this animal just randomly came out from nowhere and ran past their car, and they picked up about 12 seconds worth of footage. There are a couple of frames in there where the animal actually looks like a kangaroo in motion. I mean, it's clearly not a kangaroo because it's a quadruped and it's running quite fast, but it's very fair to say it's probably some of the best historical footage we have of mainland thylacine evidence. You can see quite clearly on the hind quarters in some of the frames there's something that does appear like broad stripes on the rump. So it's definitely got quite a few features of a thylacine. And the tail on it is just amazing. It's so long and straight and stiff. So, yeah, the Doyle footage is, in my opinion, some of the best footage that there is.
Any scientist who closes their mind completely about what's being recorded out there in the wild, sightings, tracks are not evidence. We need a body to change that statement that the animal is extinct. But you can only say many of those sightings are detailed. They are done by professional people who are sane, not affected by alcohol or other drugs at the time, and you can only say you have to keep an open mind.
We're following sightings, so we'll go to an area where there's been some solid sightings, the more recent the better. We'll look for animal trackways in those areas, we'll look for prints, scats.
It's pretty small. We've got sequences of 4, which is interesting.
Sometimes we get lucky and we find a full set of prints, so we might get 20 or 30 prints in a line depending on the nature of the site. Wet sandy areas are also pretty useful because anything walking in wet sand is going to leave a print. So creeks, drains, that sort of thing.
So we've got a print here, and it would appear that it's almost got a 5th toe on the, this would be a left front on the impression there.
We measure our track lines as well. We try and work out the gait pattern, what the footfall pattern is. And the fact that we keep finding these really Thylacine-like prints all over the mainland makes me quite convinced that they have not become extinct and they are actually very elusive, very rare, but very widespread because the prints turn up from Cape York Peninsula to the bottom of Western Australia.
1866, we have all our cuttings from 1866.
AFRA stands for the Australian Rare Fauna Research Association. They were established in the 1980s. They've had some very dedicated members for about 35, 40 years now. Probably the best organisation for private research of unusual animal sightings in Australia. So their database is really extensive and they've got records going back to the 1800s. If it's been reported, AFRA's probably got a record of it somewhere.
There was about 8 or 10 really clear front prints that had that 5th claw off to the side.
I'm the South Australian representative for AFRA. I've been in it now for just over a year. I now have well over 500 sightings in South Australia for thylacines over the years, and that has helped me map out a considerable amount of data to give me an idea of where I should be focusing most of my attention on. And that's constantly updated as well with all the new data that's coming through, so that keeps me focused on a few key areas where I'm feeling a little bit more confident that we might get lucky one day.
I probably would have been about 50 to 100 metres away. I was sitting in a car, had the binoculars, and I thought, wow, that's an unusual looking animal. And it's walking along and there's stripes on its hindquarters, stripes along its tail. But what got me was the head, the size of the head, like a prehistoric looking head on it. I was just totally amazed. And then I was going out to this particular place probably, I'd say about 2 or 3 times a week. I got a camcorder, took the camcorder out there. The first time, that's what I got. I know what a fox and a mangy fox looks like. And these guys are totally different, totally different. And the bands were actually quite thick, not thin stripes, they were like bands. Just the ugliest face on him. He had such a big, ugly looking face. On one occasion I saw I'm assuming a female with 2 pups. I know one time I did see one, and then behind her, over further, there was a fox. And I remember thinking now, but he was coming from the opposite way. I'm thinking now, what's going to happen if these two meet? But they didn't even cross paths. This thylacine, he was a lot bigger and broader than the fox. The fox had the typical bushy tail, pointy nose, the red colour, and this guy here, yeah, he was the browny grey. the long straight tail, and a different gait about him altogether than a fox terrier, as a fox would trot. But this one sort of like amble. Another one that I saw too when I was driving, and I thought what I saw was a dead wallaby on the side of the road. As I went past it, it got up and it was actually what I believe to be a thylacine, and I don't know if he was sick or injured, and he had blue eyes. And he just got up and he ambled across the road like a real awkward gait about him and went off into the bush. But again, he was long straight tail and stripes on his tail, and I reckon he had a couple of stripes on his back, the really big, ugly head. And I was that close to him, and he just had incredible blue eyes. Oh my God, he would have only probably been a couple of feet from me, about 5 feet in front of me. But obviously there was more than one out there, like, you know, where I saw the two running across the road. It's like, oh God, you know.
John Barry is an amateur paleontologist who is affiliated with Flinders University in the paleontology department, and he was involved with the dig at Naracoorte Caves for quite a many years, and he also has very good knowledge of Thylacine and as well as Thylacine fossils. Actually, the giant python that was found in the Naracoorte Caves dig was named after him, Wanambi Barrii, so he's quite a well-respected and knowledgeable man when it comes to fossils of native fauna in the mainland especially.
We sort of surmised that it came out of the creek, it came up their driveway, the whole family saw it at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon in March, so there's plenty of daylight hours. It surprised the gentleman of the house that much that he jumped up out of his seat, ran out the front yard. It had scattered down the street and headed towards a large patch of bushland in the area. The neighbour came out as well because the neighbour saw it running down the street, and they were both at odds as to what they'd seen, and he then ended up researching different animals. He spent a lot of time travelling around Australia. He said it was like nothing he'd ever seen before. And lucky for us, his son was home one day in February this year, and being a typical teenager, he had his mobile phone handy, and he saw it once and missed it, and then half an hour later it came back past again, and he managed to get out the front door with his mobile phone in hand, and this is what he caught.
Phenomenal. It looks like stripes. It's, to me, the distinctive tail joining as a kangaroo's would is absolutely profound. I don't know that back leg, how you could fraudulently produce that.
It was a very compelling piece of video because it had so much witness testimony to go with it. It was a multiple witness situation, and although you can't really see stripes clearly, the tail on that animal is so thick set at the base, so typically marsupial in that area where it stores fat like a kangaroo, and the head and the face on the animal is very thylacine-like as well. It's very muscly and stocky. It certainly doesn't look like a mangy fox to me. There's been a lot of debate about it. There's been a lot of to and fro, but I was quite convinced when I heard their first story that they'd seen the thylacine, and when we got that bit of footage to go with it, that just backed it up for me 100%.
I just find that rump into the tail absolutely bizarre. There's no way that's a fox mangy or otherwise.
And what gives you that?
The rounded rump, the broadening of the tail as it joins the body.
It is really wide at the base,
It's really wide at the base. And I don't think that's a lighting illusion, what we're seeing there. It's
because it is so well lit.
Yeah, it's very well lit. But the head held down, the whole demeanour of the body is just like what we see from movies of the thylacines in Tassie back in Beaumaris in the 30s.
As far as thylacines go, not necessarily a really big animal, because they're known to get quite large. Some of the ones that were shot in Tasmania in the 1800s were very big. But when you tie in the bit of information we have about the Mundrabilla animal, which was quite small and definitely a thylacine, gender is considerably different. Now,
I come up with the idea of doing a meet and greet because so many people wanted to catch up and find out about thylacines and all this mainland data, because so many people had never heard of it. So we had our first meet and greet at Carrickhill in Adelaide, in the marquee there at the cafe, which was really useful because it held just over 100 people quite comfortably. And it was a huge success. We sold over 100 tickets online, and the marquee was chock-a-block.
Okay, so hands up, who thinks they've seen a thylacine in this audience? A quarter of you think you've seen something?
I had my friends Adrian and Tam from Animals Anonymous join us, and they did an animal presentation for a good 45 minutes with the crowd there, and they loved it.
The light, there we go, whoa! If you do want to tap the belly, that's where they make all your handbags and your wallets.
They had quolls, they had snakes, and all sorts of little goodies for people to experience hands-on, and you know that's the whole message that we're about, people getting out and connecting with nature.
Yeah, that's right. Anybody heard of the Tantanoola tiger? Been to the Tantanoola pub and seen it? Yeah, it's a dog. A lot of people that came to the Tantanoola pub to see the tiger, now it's finally been shot, all said, that's not the animal we saw. The animal we saw had stripes.
We had one sighting that had been reported to us from a lady who was living on the Nullarbor in 1966, and she saw one in broad daylight running along a fence when they were driving along the ute out on a station out there, and she never told anyone until she rang me one day. The meet and greets really did bring a lot of people out of the woodwork for us and gave us even more information.
And so many of those sightings are within a 45-minute drive from where we're standing right now. And everyone's going to say, you're all bonkers. No one's seen a thylacine, it's a mangy fox, blah, blah, blah. But when I get someone give me a sighting from, say, Golden Grove, hypothetically this is, it was 3 years ago. Oh yeah, no worries. I'll go back through my data. Someone else saw someone there 30 years ago. That's when you make the connection. This is why sightings data is so important, because it shows you a history. These animals have a pattern. They follow a migratory route.
I'm used to seeing animals under spotlight, and that was nothing I've ever seen before, and its gait was the giveaway. If you shoot under spotlight, one of the things that you do is you pick an animal by its gait. You can tell whether it's a hare, a rabbit, if it's a fox, nothing like I've ever seen before. I did see the stripes on the back, but the thing that really sticks in my mind, and I think everyone that's seen one comments on it, was the gait. They have a really unique gait.
From behind some sort of cover, this large, very striped animal came out from behind it. And he sort of looked at us, and we had to look at him. And my next down brother, who was probably 14 or something, said, "It's a tiger." And he took off. And that startled the animal, and the animal took off in the other direction.
Europeans came to Australia, they found a foreign land filled with really unusual animals. None of it really made sense. It was a very hostile climate in some areas, still is. It was a strange set of rules for people to start working with. They tried to apply European farming practices in Australia, and it failed in many areas. Not enough rainfall, poor quality soils, and then we introduced hard-hooved animals on top of those poor, thin topsoils. We've caused some irreparable erosion damage. We've got feral animals that we've introduced. We've wiped out most of the habitat in some areas, so it's not surprising we've got mass extinctions on a national scale. Things have been addressed and some things have improved. 1080 certainly helped for quite a while with getting fox numbers down, but it's not the answer to everything. I think that there's definitely need for better science and more physical hands-on pest control when it comes to vermin. There's lots of things that we've done where we've really gone wrong with the environment, and the more we can sort of promote our native fauna and flora, the more areas we can get protected, the better off the environment and biodiversity is going to be as a whole.
With the fossil dig in Wanambi and henschkes, did you come across any other subspecies of thylacine at all, or was it all Cynocephalus?
We get a lot of variability. Are we looking at sexual dimorphism?
Yep.
Or are we looking at different species? My gut feeling is there's enough variation there that suggests there may be two different forms. Largeness is not necessarily a good character, but if you've got a large little one and a small big one, you're starting to get the grey area.
Yeah.
But size of some animals is not necessarily a really good indication of species. You've got to look at the wear, more particularly the lack of wear, and molars are a good indicator. There's a lovely little upper jaw. This is a very interesting jaw actually. Now they have 3 premolars, 1, 2, 3, but in this case the second premolar is made up of 2 discrete individual teeth that mimic the shape of what should be there.
During the 1960s in South Australia there was a lot of land clearing going on because the government was planning on bringing in native vegetation protection, so there was a last minute push to get more farmland developed. And as a result there was a huge amount of sightings in the 1960s in South Australia, over 300 that I know of. And there were probably quite a few that weren't reported too, of animals that basically were described as thylacines.
A local woman here, she's moved away now, driving along, and they come over a slight rise around a bend, and there in the middle of the road was an animal somewhat like a dog with stripes on its back. They stopped. They had a camera in the glove box, but the moment just totally froze them, a bit like my Black Panther story. I could have got some sort of a picture if I'd been thinking clearly, but you just say, oh wow, what's
the
that?
shock of the moment.
Now, what's more remarkable about that sighting is they did not know what it was. They recognised it wasn't a dog. They go home, they get a Reader's Digest book out that had Australian animals in it. They find the Tassie tiger, Thylacine. That's exactly what we saw.
Us for what sort of evidence we can produce to support our claims about unusual animals being out there, and footprints is definitely a way of supporting what you think people are seeing out there when they have a sighting. For example, we've got this one here, and this one was from last year out of suburban Adelaide, and this is truly a massive print, this one, compared to dog one, which is 4 inches without a hop, and this one here, without the hop, is nearly 4 3/4. If it was a Tasmanian tiger, i.e. a Thylacine from Tasmania, from what we know, the fructose would be up here. Now this larger print, which looks marsupial still, because you can see by the huge spacings between the digits that you can clearly put your finger through. Now, you've also got evidence of dermal ridging at the base of the plantar pad here, either side. And this is a massive print. I've showed this to a lot of people and they just overwhelmed with the size of it. With a dog's footprint, you tend to have your toe pad placement going in almost a semicircular sort of arc, almost 180 degrees around in a circle. Now, with a Thylacine print, and these are from northwest Tasmania from 1985, this one here, and you can see the spacing between the toes. This is due to the fact that a Thylacine didn't have, or doesn't have, membrane, webbing membrane between the toes, so when they run, their toes splay outwards. So this typical sort of quadruped marsupial feature, you've also got your dermal ridging here at the base, which is leading up through a singular plantar pad. Although there is a slight impression at the base, it's clearly a single plantar pad. Now this has been confirmed by Dr. Aaron Kamen from Flinders University here in Adelaide, who has been studying fossilised marsupial trackways, and he's come to the conclusion with the plantar pad impressions that he's examined from trackways on Kangaroo Island in South Australia, that the Thylacine in those prints only had a singular plantar pad. They did not have a trilobe plantar pad. This is from 1985 in northwest Tasmania, and this print here was associated directly with several sightings on the same property, and after one of the sightings, the farmer in question went down to the creek line, found 3 or 4 prints and cast them. We keep getting sightings of unusual animals that are either fitting the appearance of a thylacine or a large black cat. Now, we're not 100% certain that every one of these large black cats that people are seeing are actually feline. There's every possibility they may be some sort of marsupial. And these large 5-toed prints with the 5th toe down here below the plantar pad instead of alongside of it is almost reminiscent of Thylacine, but it doesn't have the sheath around the 5th toe, which should be evident if it was a Thylacine print. But this is appearing all over mainland Australia. We are finding these prints. What it is, we're not certain, but we're certain that it's not canine, and we're certain that it's rather big. This is a purebred Victorian alpine dingo print, full-grown adult male. You can see the difference in size, considerable. When I was down in Tassie earlier on this year, I found about 18 prints in a creek.
So what you got here is tiger tracks running right alongside the wallaby tracks.
This gives you an indication of the variation within prints from one animal. So this is one animal's trackway. So you never actually get 2 prints that are exactly the same. There is a lot of variation. Clearly running on its toes, digigrade, which is consistent with a thylacine, whereas canines tend to be more planigrade, meaning they run on their plantar pad. The substrate will give you a huge variation too, the substrate being the soil that it's running on. So if it's really wet and soft, you'll get very deep impressions, a lot of variation. They've got all the features that you're looking for with thylacine. There's a couple of rear ones in there as well with a extension of the hock that you can see quite clearly. This proves to me that the animals are still active in the area, which is something I've always known since I saw 2 in that area. And not only that, you also get to learn about the gait of these animals, and the gait pattern is quite consistent both on the mainland and on Tasmania. A lot of the trackways we're finding in Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, Queensland, they've all got the same consistency. There's some really unusual animals out there that all have the hallmarks of being thylacines. This was sent to me by Matthew Edison, and he found some really unusual trackways. Again, you've got these large prints. You've got the claw drag, which is typical as well with some of these unusual marsupial type prints. So the toe nails actually drag into the toe pads as it lifts its foot, and it leaves these little scrapings and little mounds of dirt in some of those toe pad impressions. And here we have another large print from Western Australia from today. We've got our hock here, we've got the triangulation of the heel going down. What appears to be a 5th toe off to the side here, again below the plantar pad, and we've got that nice gradual arc for the toes. Rather large plump plantar pad there, and a considerably long print, same proportion as the one from South Australia. What a coincidence. This is my original thylacine trackline video that I got in northeast Tasmania. This is very typical of the thyla type trackways we find on the mainland as well. There's your 2 front and your 2 rear at the front there, and it's left the creek, landed here. It's doing a transverse gallop as far as I can tell, or a rotary gallop nearly all of the time. There's my footprint next to it, so you can see how big it is. It's quite large. There's a lot of consistency here with horse-type gait patterns and what was written about thylacines in early accounts from early settlers in Tasmania. There's more to this than just sightings of people that are allegedly drunk coming home from a pub seeing a mangy fox. There is some big animals there. Some of these prints are being found in association with sightings in areas, so that makes it even more consistent and significant. And we really do need to follow this up and investigate it to our full capacity. Look away if you're squeamish, but another thing that's really important with a lot of the anecdotal evidence we're finding is animals that have been mutilated by predators, and we're finding some real consistent type kill patterns that are reflective of a thylacine type kill pattern. For example, We've got animals with their hearts and lungs missing, kidneys are gone, livers are gone. So there's a lot of consistency with the mutilations and the kill patterns that we're finding on the mainland with the historical data in regards to thylacines in Tasmania. We've got 5,000 plus sightings on the mainland and at least 2,500, 3,000 sightings in Tasman over the last 80 years. There is definitely animals that are either remnant thylacine populations or some other sort of closely related marsupial quadruped. There's some very strong similarities with a lot of the sightings data that we get. People often talk about the unusual gait pattern when they've seen it run away, or they talk about the stiff, long, pointy tail, the thick base of the tail that's consistent with kangaroos. There are so many consistent similarities with kill patterns, with sightings data, with footfall patterns and gait patterns and the size and shape of prints. There's just so much data here, you can't ignore it. Two ladies met through the Field Naturalist Society in the southeast, Kath Alcock and Dawn Anderson, and they undertook a friendship of mutual interest in investigating these strange animal sightings that were happening all over the southeast at the time and in Victoria as well. And they investigated over 300 sightings, got very close to proving it. They both had their own personal sightings of the animals. They took some print casts. We're still getting prints down in that area that were really similar to the photos that were taken by Kath and Dawn. We have access to at least one of those photos. And so the animal that was leaving prints down there in the late 60s is still leaving prints down there this year. I couldn't find Dawn, but Kath is certainly an illuminated character and a real genuine Australian lady. She was just so passionate about her research into thylacines, and her and Dawn really made a huge contribution. And I think at the time you probably had more chance of finding a thylacine in South Australia than you did in Tasmania due to the amount of sightings. And Kath and Dawn got very close to proving it. Sadly they didn't, but they certainly left a legacy of information behind for people like me to come along and utilise as some sort of a resource to try and work out if the animals are still in the areas where they were historically seen so many times.
Yourself and Dawn were investigating this for a couple of years, do you think?
Oh, at least.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
But it was funny, they were all around the Rattenbury Camoom area and over there.
Right.
Well, then they disappeared. You see, we learnt that they go around in a circle every 2 years. It could be 2.5 or anything like that.
So you took a few plaster casts of the prints you found along the way?
Dawn did.
Yeah?
Yeah, she took those.
Women's Weekly did the article on New
How
Zealand.
did you come across that?
Oh, I get around.
I demand to know.
It's called the internet. Everything's on there.
And I saw 2 heads bobbing through the bracken, galloping, just 2 heads. And I went and had a look at these giant footprints. A chap working in the shearing shed, scoffing, and I don't believe in his own imagination. He came back to work on the Monday and he was a bit glum and gloomy. What's wrong with you? He said, I saw one of those animals. I did a U-turn like that and picked up the rabbit and going back towards the boot. And I'm going like this, and by the time I turned around
and
they'd gone in the bushes.
Every time I show a print that I believe is a thylacine print
Yeah.
to one of the experts, i.e. someone from the museum or a paleontologist, they try and tell me it's a dog print.
Oh, of course they do. They did that with Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With everything that happened back then that you were investigating, you're quite convinced of what you were investigating?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still believe in it.
Yeah.
It is what Dawn used to call the animal, in capital letters. It has to be. There can't be anything else.
A friend of mine, Vaughan King, who researches big cats, found this scat. I had it given to him, I'm not sure exactly what. Get a quick shot. Don't breathe. This guy here, we're going to get tested. And we'll also test these ones as well. We know what these are. So this is our quoll, this is our devil, and this is our suspected thylacine scat. This is also suspected thylacine scap, but somewhat stenchier than that one because this one's been baked a little longer. This one's a lot fresher. So we're going to bag this up and we're going to send it off to about 2 or 3 different laboratories in Australia, and hopefully we get a positive result that is worth putting up with all this stinky poo for.
The skeptics say to me, why hasn't anybody seen one? And I say, but they do. They see them all the time, but you dismiss their sightings. So
If we're out there looking for things and we just happen to discover things that we presumed extinct, who are we really hurting? What have we done wrong? You know, I'm really tired of all the naysayers and the negative people that just want to have a go at us for trying to prove that an animal might actually still be there because so many people claim to have seen it. We are actually trying. We're not costing anyone hardly anything. We've had a GoFundMe, we've had a few donations, but we've spent that money on cameras and fitted people out with cameras all over Australia.
Lack of evidence is not evidence of a lack of. So people who haven't seen it aren't well qualified to say whether it's there or not.
I believe they're going to find more soon what we talked about, you know. I'd like more people to come and talk to us because we know so much about the land. I mean, yeah.
Dr. Bob Paddle is a scientific researcher. His book is probably one of the best that's ever been written because it's taken from a very scientific perspective. When we spoke to Bob, he confirmed a lot of the things we actually suspected, so that was really, really helpful.
It was an eye-opener to me to try to confront the fact that science is a cultural phenomenon and that it changes its perspective sometimes in the absence of data or because of the particular status of somebody who says something. Science is as much capable of being corrupted as any other professional and non-professional behaviour.
When you look at the definition of science, it is observation. It's not a myth, it's our history. It's our past and it comes into our present and it'll go into our future.
The university doesn't want me wasting my time chasing an animal if it's very unlikely that I'm going to find it.
Well, they're wrong. They did exist. Scientists should look around. I believe soon they're going to find more evidence of these animals.
In South Australia, equally Western Australia, Victoria, that research has to be done, but I don't think you can rely upon scientists in universities to do it.
I think they should get out more.
Yeah, they need to get out in the country.
They need to get out in the country. This is a big country, and when you take down the yellowfoot rock wallaby, they actually thought that was extinct. They're in there. They found them here. A lot of tourists see thylacines in this area.
There are enough reports that I've had that are impeccable, clear, not influenced by emotions, people that are as straight as, and repeating their storylines year by year, stick with the facts and there's no change.
What do you say to people who are still critical or sceptical about thylacines existing on the mainland?
Get lost.
Sightings going back to the 1800s, both in Aboriginal folklore as well. Also, there's been considerable amount of sightings from a lot of the residents in the area historically. Nannup, the town, has really embraced the thylacine. The whole community supports its existence over there, regardless of what the official line is on it being extinct. They're quite convinced of what they've seen and what they know about the animal in their area, and they're very proud of it. The meet and greet in Nannup was primarily to help get a representation for that part of the story for thylacines on the mainland, and also to hear the local stories and their version of events for what's happened to them over there, their descriptions of the animal. There was a lot of common things in regards to the clues they find around the place, heads missing, hearts missing, lungs missing, and the noises as well, the vocalisations of the animal. Some really interesting prints as well coming through from Western Australia. So Nannup is an essential part of any story about thylacines on the mainland of Australia, because the town and the community there are almost obsessed with it, as much as anywhere I've seen in Tasmania, that's for sure.
I've been largely researching from a South Australian perspective. I get a lot of information from all over Australia. This is very time-consuming stuff because most people have got a full-time job and they have to earn money and all the rest of it, and sadly the government doesn't want to pay anyone to look for extinct animals, only endangered ones.
It was running up and down the ringlock fence. They planted pines there, and the fence was trying to get through the fence.
Oh, okay, so you got a good look at it.
Yeah, my brother came down the next day, and there was the footprints were no bigger than that.
Yeah, big.
Yeah. Well, the ones we've seen are the dark brown, but you still can't see the stripes.
Yep.
And on the side of the road there was like this, it was like a dog fox. I didn't really know what it was at first, and I was like, well, that's really weird. And I was trying to get Mum and Sol to look, but I was like screaming or whatever, and I was like, look there, and they were all looking at me, and they were like, what? And I'm like, right there, look.
It was eyeballing me, and I was stood there looking at it, and my instant thought was, do I grab a camera? Do I grab a gun? What do I do? And then I realised if I go back and move and go back in the house, I'm going to lose sight of this thing and not going to know where it's gone, and so I just decided to stand and enjoy the moment that I had with it.
It's all about raising awareness, about promoting what we believe, and seeing if we can find a few people to share a few of their experiences as well. You know, when you're talking about thousands and thousands of sightings, there's got to be something more to that than just a shared hallucination.
My father was born on this farm, and he grew up clearing the land with his father. And when he was a boy, he used to trap kangaroos to sell their skins, and by doing that he would use snares on the fence line. And it was in one of those snares one morning that he found a thylacine, or a mysterious creature. He didn't know what it was. It was big, rather dark. He did say he thought it was black. No stripes, but it didn't match any animal he'd ever seen in his life before. So it took a bit for him to work out that it was a marsupial, and he really didn't know what to do with the body because no one really cared what he found in the bush back then. So he threw the body in the bush, but from that point on he was quite fascinated by this animal, and he spent his whole life basically trying to understand more about them, trying to open dialogue with other people and express his belief that they're alive and well on mainland Australia. It wasn't long after he caught that one in a snare that dingo trappers came through and said they'd shot or killed a stripy dingo. So this animal was obviously a thylacine, and they showed him the body, and this one had stripes, unlike the one he caught in the snare. So he had a few sightings. I've grown up with my dad's stories and the knowledge that these animals are out there. I have seen one, I have seen their tracks, I have heard the sounds at night. My dad's stories as we were growing up were always about, I saw one this morning when I was getting the cows in, there was a thylacine, the calf was scared. Or I watched one stalking a kangaroo, who would always explain about the sensation of working out in the bush on his own, and he would feel the hairs go up on the back of his neck, and he said that everything would go quiet and he'd get this prickling sensation on his skin and the back of his neck, and he'd go, I know what that is. And if he looked around, he would often spot one watching him. One instance he described seeing this creature, and it walked slowly across the paddock, and when it realised he had seen it, it got up on its hind legs like a kangaroo and hopped, and then gained momentum and dropped back to all fours and ran away. So that was when he shared that information with us about their unusual gait and their ability to hop like a kangaroo for a few paces. Yeah, there were so many stories when we were growing up. My first sighting of a thylacine was, ironically, not here on the farm. It was closer to Bunbury. It was 3 in the morning. I was heading home, coming through Bunbury, and this creature leapt out onto the road in front of me and across the road quite rapidly, Yeah, I did the bit of the brain scramble where I'm going, it's a cat, no, it's too big. It's not a tabby, it's a fox, no, it's not a fox, it's got a hairless, long, stiff tail. It's not a dog, it's a, holy shish, you know, I've just seen a thylacine. So it was a bit of a revelation, and I was probably 2 miles down the road by this point. So this was a striped animal that had run across the road in the early hours of the morning. In this area, there were constantly sightings being reported by people. Dad's frustration was with bureaucracy. He wanted to prove the animal was here, but he basically ran into a brick wall every time he made a report of a sighting. There were instances where he had scats and hair and saliva samples, and he would send them off trustingly, and they would disappear into the ether and never be heard of again. Every time they made reports of sightings, they were denied or lost or ignored or laughed at. I think it was Dad's frustration at years and years of this kind of treatment that made him put that little book together. I know the issues of Kevin's photos have come up over the time. I was on the periphery of what my brother and Kevin and my dad were doing. They had put a freshly killed kangaroo carcass in the base of a tree, and it was in a spot where he had seen one and tracked one with his dogs previously, so they knew they were close to a lair. And so he waited, and he said that he heard the animal come along, and there was never a doubt in my mind that what he shared, his photographs were true, they weren't faked. Kevin was very honest. Everything he was doing was really just working with my family to try and get evidence of this animal's existence.
Through all these meets and greets and all these witnesses we've got statements from, we can start to get a better idea of how the animal behaves, its breeding cycle, its migratory routes. All of these sorts of things are critical bits of information for locating the animal and proving it exists.
The breeding areas, you know, I showed you the sand hills?
Yeah.
That represents their nests. When Marukuli has a babies, as joeys,
yep,
they keep them in the pouch.
Yep.
And when they get too big for their pouch, when they grow, they then make nests for them.
There's a thylacine which is at least 5 years old, which died in London Zoo, which is still described in the scientific literature as a young thylacine. Most contemporary scientists now and contemporary scientists in the past assumed it was an annual breeder. I think its breeding was a lot slower than that. At the most it was once every 2 years, might have been once every 3 or 4. There's no evidence whatsoever to suggest that the males established a territory and then picked up a female. There is conflicting evidence in the literature that I think nevertheless favours the idea that the female established a territory and then chose a male. They bonded and mated for life, and were very strict about that and never mated with anybody else. Alison Reid, who's the last person to fill the curatorial role at Hobart Zoo, suggested they would have lived for at least 20 years, and I could see that that was probably true.
If I see a fresh set of prints, I always get a sense of happiness that yes, it's still here, it's still walking its traditional corridors that it's always walked.
From what I've learnt from some of the museum specimens that are kicking around, there is a huge variation in the colour of thylacines.
Yep.
They are not all fawn with black stripes.
No, they're not all striped.
That's right, they're not all striped either. I've heard of that as well.
I'm almost suspecting one record I had, I think it was a Victorian sighting that said the big one had no stripes.
They don't particularly need forests, they need low-lying scrub and thick bush areas that they can hide in. I think a lot of the time people go, well, how come we don't find bodies of them in the bush? But their lairs were typically in thickets and scrubby areas that are so well hidden that they would go back to their lairs to die, and the bodies wouldn't be found.
Put my lights on high beam, and there was this strange animal. I knew what it was because I'd actually looked at photographs of the thylacines over the years, and it was definitely one of them going up the bank. You could see the tail and a few of the stripes on the back of the body. I reckon over the years, because I was actually working shift work, and I'd come home between midnight and 3 o'clock, and And I reckon I saw this at least probably 5 or 6 times, and it was mainly in 2 places where I saw it. Even my wife didn't believe me that I was seeing them until she was with me one night and saw one of them going up the bank where I had seen it previously many times, doing exactly what it had been doing other periods. This time it was probably around midnight.
Literally like around the corner from home, and I slowed down because I saw just something out of the corner of my eye just kind of stop in the middle of the road, and I looked at it and it was just nothing I had seen before. And then it ran across the road with the most strangest gait I've ever seen.
The first thing I noticed was the stripes. It had a kind of stripe pattern on it. It was a bit dark to distinguish colours, but there was definitely a dark white pattern. And its long, slender face, and it kind of looked a bit like a cross between a marsupial and a mammal. It was it had quite an odd shape.
I noticed the shape of its body in particular, and how the rib cage kind of hung down. It had a bit of a hunch back a bit. It was pretty decent size, and it was skinny in the lower body, and then it had a long, stiff, kind of thick tail that went a bit thinner. We stopped in the middle of the road and we kind of looked at each other and we were like, what the hell was that? And we just sat there for about a couple of minutes and just broke down exactly what we saw to each other.
I mean, when you focus on things like locomotion and morphology, it's pretty certain.
Because it was quite confusing seeing this whole thing, and I felt like it was just really confusing. We just wanted more answers. We just wanted to see it again, and now every time I drive home I just drive a lot slower and kind of keep my eye out.
Similar to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's one of the best taxiderms I've seen, that one.
Okay.
He's in really good shape, that one.
When I was confused, when I saw, am I seeing right? When you just don't know.
Yeah.
And when I said to Chooch, did that have stripes? He goes, yeah, it certainly did.
That one there. That was sort of similar.
But we both were very dumbfounded. I thought I was looking at a fox getting closer, and then it was like, wow, what was that? It had a bigger, snout, definitely much chunkier, like a stronger snout or something, yeah. Whereas, foxes have got that skinny long, like a dog. And like the body sort of came down a bit, not like a dog.
Yep.
It
sort of sloped.
Yeah, sloped down. Yeah, never seen anything like it.
Well, a lot of the people that make the sightings, that report information, are just everyday people. They can be randomly in an area and they just see something. So there isn't any real consistency with the people who provide you with the sightings data, because they're everyday Australians. And a lot of these people are, country people too. A large percentage of them are in the country, and they know a fox, they know a dog, they know a feral pig, they know a goat, they know a llama or an alpaca or whatever, These people know their land. They've been on the land for 30, 40 years. Sometimes some of these properties have been in generations of the same family, and these stories as well of these animals have passed down through some of these families. And not just in Tasmania, on the mainland as well. I think it will always live on in our memory and in our conscience, regardless of whether we prove it's there or not. There will always be people there that are quite adamant that it is because they've seen it, or they believe they've seen it, including me. And I stand by what I saw in Tasmania twice. Maybe 15, 20 metres in the bush. Couldn't see anything. It was so thick and there's so much bracken and iron grass everywhere. It's hard to see through, but I could definitely hear something following me. Walked a bit further and I got to a bit of a flat spot after coming right up the hill from the creek, and this animal, I could still hear it. And the hair on the back of my neck was standing up because I knew something was watching me and I could hear it. Anyway, it came out. It stood behind a clump of grass. I could see the top of its head and its round ears, and I tried to get closer to it, and I walked closer, and as I got closer and closer, I I was probably only 15 metres away from it, and then I got too close and it decided it was going to hightail it out of there. As it took off, I saw the full side of the animal. I didn't see stripes. It definitely had dark brown, chocolate sort of coloured fur, and it trotted off quite quickly and it was gone, and I didn't see any trace of it. There was no prints in there or anything that was left behind, sadly, but I definitely saw an animal that looked like a thylacine to me. It had a long, stiff tail. It took off really quickly. It was a dark brown colour, and it was certainly not behaving like any other animal in the area.
They've come over the brow of the bank, and here's mum and pup laying on the side of the road sunning themselves. They've been swimming in the mud, in the muddy hole. And he said they just sat there and watched her push the young one up the bank into the bush, and she followed.
I first met Andrew in 2010. I had a chat to one of the mechanics that used to live in Scottsdale about what I thought I'd seen over by the lake. He recommended I should get in touch with him. He gave me Andrew's number, and I rang him up, and he said, yeah, come on down, I'll have a chat to you. And he's got some very interesting photos of animals that do look very much like thylacines.
Everyone's dying to see some of your photos, mate.
Righto.
Now,
That animal's neck, bigger tail, same place. The male, trying to find the female. And beside him, see the short stumpy legs?
He's released a few photos through different documentaries and things in the past. One of them in particular is very clear, and you can see what appears to be the face of a juvenile, like a joey, just next to the animal in the picture, so that's pretty cool. Andrew has been researching thylacines in Tasmania for several years, and his family have snared a couple over the years, not long after 1936, and one escaped from the snare. So they've had a fair amount of involvement with them on their property and on other properties around the place in Tasmania. Andrew's been collecting a lot of data on sightings and mutilations of animals in Tasmania for quite a few years. I think about 15 or 20 years he's been doing this. And he knows his stuff. He's definitely on the money with a lot of the things, and he was really interested in what we had to say when he came along to the meet and greet, because we had a lot of very similar things with our print casts and things like that. So he was quite impressed with some of the data that we've collected from the mainland. And I think when I first met him and talked to him about the mainland, he was a bit of a sceptic about them being on the mainland. But I think after talking to him at the meet and greet, he definitely is convinced that we're on the same path as he is when it comes to the animals we're finding evidence of. So that's a really big bonus for our credibility as far as we're concerned, because Andrew definitely knows his stuff.
And as I've slowed down, he's just got down on all fours, and he just paced across the road. There's a big bank on the other side, and he got like a kangaroo, went bang on his back feet up the bank, and away he went. And if you actually walk on them and scare them, they'll hop like a kangaroo. The first time I scared one, he got on his hind legs and hopped like a kangaroo from probably here to the corner of the building, and then got down on all fours and away he went.
Looks tiger, doesn't it?
Bloody oath it does.
But that's from suburban Adelaide, just right on the fringe. Just looks too big.
That's what gets me. Should actually be up a little bit more.
Yeah, this is why I haven't said this is definitely a thylacine print, because the toe placement doesn't seem to add up.
When you have a meet and greet and you get local people coming in and sharing their stories with you, it's a real privilege to hear some of the data that they've got to share with you, because some of it goes back 100 years. And it's been stories that have been handed down from grandpa through the dad, through the son or daughter, and those sorts of things are invaluable. That's the sort of legacy that really does need to be preserved and collected and collated and recorded, so that we can use that data to maybe find the animal, or it's a part of our national history. Just standing there, looking out this way, and I noticed what appeared to be a juvenile thylacine come trotting along here, and it just came trotting past here and headed straight off over there. I just caught it in the moonlight. You could see the shape and you could see the gait about it, but you couldn't really get any definition of stripes because it was a bit dark. But yeah, it moved so quick, and it was just coming through here. I only saw it for about 4 or 5 seconds as it trotted along, not even. But yeah, it was definitely a thyla. Definitely wasn't a fox, that's for sure. That really inspired me, because when I got back to Adelaide after being here, those holidays was when I started investigating online and discovered Facebook and all these groups about thylacines, and Then made a few contacts online and started getting a bit more extra information, and just started chasing up bits and pieces, and found some witnesses through getting some paperwork and some old witness statements, and that just started to build a file, and it just grew from there. About 7 months later, one of the tenants that stayed in here was sitting out on the porch one night, and he also claimed to see exactly the same thing. Come trotting down this track here and went straight over the embankment over the other side of the road. So I'm not the only one who saw it here. It was another person saw it too. So I put a trail cam here last year and picked up a few wombats. There's 2 distinct feral cats, 2 different ones. One's a black one, one's a tabby, that come through here and spray and mark their territory quite frequently. There's a whole plethora of small macropods, from bandicoots, wallabies, paddymellons, potoroos, there's all sorts of things. There was a few ambiguous videos in there, but there was one in particular where we just managed to film what appears to be the rump of a thylacine sitting there, grooming itself basically right at the bottom corner of the camera on the screen. So if it had only moved 4 inches over to the left, it would be the perfect video. But what you've got there is basically something with a very stripy behind, and it's grooming itself in front of the camera, and it sits there for 20 seconds. There's a bit of a shadow behind it from the LEDs on the camera. Every other video from that card has got a shadow behind it. There's no Photoshop or trickery. It's an animal in northeast Tasmania with a stripy bum sitting there grooming itself.
Aboriginal people, judging what the people today, they see it medically, alright, they automatically put it in the spiritual sense because of the fear that they had of the, not of the ferocity of this animal, but the power that it represents on a spiritual level is top dog, or top marsupial should say.
We do have to bring this thylacine out into the open, talk about where it does live, prove its existence once and for all, because otherwise the habitat that it relies upon will be gone.
How do you protect something that doesn't exist?
Well, this is true. How do you prove it's there if you're not allowed to catch it?
That's right. It's a conglomeration of stupid rules.
They're here because I didn't go up looking for thylacines that day. I went up for a picnic and there was in a mudderfully. But when you hear tourists, we just come out to Australia to see kangaroos and emus and stuff, and then they come in sightings of an animal, and that's the fact because they don't know what it is, and makes you think, yeah, I did see what I see.
It's random people all the time, all over Australia, and some areas are particularly hot. Gippsland in Victoria, around the Nannup area in Western Australia, the southeast of South Australia, Cape York Peninsula in Queensland, the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. These animals have been seen in all of these key areas, but they've also been seen in the Nullarbor, they've been seen in the Flinders Ranges. You know, they're widespread. This isn't a local type one-off thing. This is massive. It's a massive, all-encompassing amount of data. It's massive. When you look at the data, it's huge.
Countless people would be thrilled because we already know it's there. We're just so frustrated at our inability to find the proof that the experts want to make a declaration of its existence. So I think we'd be rejoicing if we could finally have what we know to be true, declared as true by the experts and given that stamp of approval.
Those people who are out chasing sightings, chasing tracks in the bush, one has to admire them and hope that they will come up with an animal that will change the scientific perspective upon the species that it is extinct. All power to you and everybody else who's doing that.
Thank you.